Lance Stroll is wasting a position in Formula One. Yes, he's a decent driver for a paid driver, but he's not a driver who deserves to be in Formula One. And you're seeing that next to Alonso. A lot of people say Alonso is one of the best drivers of all time. That is true, but Lance Stroll is not even putting up a fight. Alonso's had 5 or 6 podiums this season, and the best Lance Stroll has been able to do is 1/4 position. Now, he came into Formula One with some cred in F2, but really, he hasn't come up with much. He's one of those guys who comes up with like a couple of strokes of brilliance. He's had a couple podiums here and there, but really he's never been able to capitalize on any of that stuff. He was with the BW2 Racing Point team when Sergio Perez won that race, which essentially secured his future with Red Bull and his future in Formula One. But the people like Lance Stroll is like, they get complacent. His dad's a billionaire. His dad bankrolled him getting into Formula One in the first place with Williams, and now his dad owns the team. I've argued and told people many, many times, Lance Stroll has the safest seat in Formula One. Think about it. As good as Max Verstappen is, as good as any driver is, if they suddenly dropped off completely, they couldn't stay in Formula One. Guess who can? The guy whose dad owned a team. I mean, we've seen some pretty crazy nepotism in Formula One over the years. Recently, Nikita Mazepin, $20 million to float the Haas team. We've seen guys who've come in with billionaire dads like Max Chilton. They were around for a couple of seasons, but it wasn't it. And maybe sometimes you even had money from tobacco, Marlboro, maybe a certain company backed you like Tata from India with, Narain Karthikeyan. But this is beyond anything I've ever seen. We've never known a driver whose dad owns the team, whose mom shows up to a significant part of the Grand Prix. You think he's going to destroy his personal life with his wife, his kids, his daughter, his family, his cousins, his uncles, his nephews, nieces, brothers, sisters, and get rid of his son? No, this is Lance Stroll's favorite thing to do. It's his passion. And on top of it, he's one of those guys that really pisses you off because he does just enough where you're like, okay, I guess he can stay at the team. But that Aston Martin has so much potential. There's been so much investment in that from his father, getting resources from other investors, and making that a car that can get podiums. Not recently, but for a huge significant part of this season, it really did. It looked at one point like it could be the number 2 team. When Fernando Alonso said there was a problem with the car that almost made it not finish the Canadian Grand Prix, yet he finished second. Second, like 6 or 8 seconds behind, not 33 seconds behind like you saw in Hungary recently. This was a car that was getting close to the front that they thought maybe Alonso, if he had the car at the time at the Canadian Grand Prix and it didn't have any electrical issues, he could have at least tried to hunt down Verstappen. He may have not been successful at all. He may have come in within 3 or 4 seconds and then Verstappen really lays the hammer down. But they said they believed it had that potential. Now, this is the problem with Lance Stroll. He'll put in his 6th, he'll put in his 7th, and then he'll put in like a 12th or a 14th, or not finish the race, or have an issue. And you've seen George Russell actually talk about this. And George Russell didn't say his name specifically, but he said, there are Formula One drivers on the circuit that we all know you have to be careful when you're passing. Now, Lance Stroll is very aggressive when people try and pass him. And the reason he's able to be like that, not only because that's his style, but he's been able to perpetuate that because his seat's so careful. He really drives people hard. People who have much faster cars than him, he pushes them off. And he can get any penalty or any blowback he wants, but he knows his seat is safe. As long as his dad's at the helm. And when is his dad not going to be at the helm? This guy could be in Formula One for the next 5 years. And people are saying, oh, that's crazy. We've heard rumors about his dad thinking about getting a good driver there. That ain't happening. The only way that would happen is if he secured his son a seat at some other Formula One team, maybe like an Alfa Romeo. That's the only way he could get rid of him. And he's just getting totally dominated by Alonso. He got beaten by Vettel. He's gotten beaten by Massa. He gets beaten by guys who show up to drive for the team for like 2 races. Like Nico Hulkenberg would show up and beat him. Whenever somebody had an injury or anything, they would just show up and beat him. But he'll have these situations where, I came back from a bike crash and I was able to be right near Alonso and stuff. It's just not working anymore. He's the most frustrating person because unlike a Latifi or another paid driver who can't put in any results, he puts in just so he can skate by the skin of his teeth and staying at the team. They should get rid of him. They should put in another guy. If they did, they could possibly actually challenge other teams to the Constructors' Championship. Right now, they're at like 184 points, and they'll probably be caught by Ferrari if it continues, because after all of those podiums from Alonso, it just doesn't look like he has the car anymore. Or maybe the upgrades of other teams like Mercedes, like Ferrari, even like in Alpine lately and a McLaren, it's just going to surpass them. So if Alonso doesn't have somebody by who's really challenging him, and that's really what made Alonso the best. Every time Alonso had a guy next to him that challenged him, it brought the best out of him. Even a Hamilton, a guy I'm not the biggest fan of, when he showed up to that McLaren team, it pushed Alonso to be better. But ever since then, Alonso's really never been next to a guy who's on his level when it comes to just pure pace and talent. Lance Stroll is a decent driver. He is a paid driver. And if he wants to be a paid driver, go to IndyCar, go to sports car. Your dad could definitely fund all that stuff. You're just taking up space and time in a competitive nature, in a sport, in a organization that needs to have the best people constantly. Obviously, people are in Formula One for the wrong reasons. They shouldn't be there. You could say Zhou Guanyu's there because he's Chinese. There's a Chinese Grand Prix. But he didn't bring that many sponsors, but he finished well in F2. I don't think Magnussen should be there. There's a lot of guys who need to go because Formula One should be the peak of racing. And unless you're bringing tons of money, his dad already has the money. He's just there because of a personal relationship with his father. He's not even there because of the money anymore. His dad would own that team without him. He was a billionaire before his son showed up. So this guy is taking up space, needs to be dropped, but I'd have a question. Comment below who you think should replace him. If his father is actually being serious, because we have heard rumors that he will be replaced eventually by a pretty good driver who could, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars per spot you finish in the Constructors. Between 4th and 5th, that could represent a huge amount of money that could be reinvested into the team. So if he should be gotten rid of, do you agree with that? And on top of it, who would you replace him with? I'll definitely comment back to you if I think you're crazy or right. Please comment below, subscribe, and like. Thank you very much.